Hello and welcome to Auspol Explained. I'm your curly-haired ginger host, David, and with me is another fellow ginger. Today I'm going to be interviewing the Honourable Wilson Tucker, who has a very specific and niche historical achievement. But first, can you please just introduce yourself for those at home?
Hi David, my name is Wilson Tucker. I'm a member for Mining and Pastoral Region and independent for the region. I'm a former leader of the Daylight Saving Party.
Former leader of the Daylight Savings Party, which is probably not a political party that most people have heard of, unless they've heard of you in the news, because you made history in the 2021 WA state election, getting voted in on just 98 primary votes.
Yes.
How did that work?
Well, very, very good question. Look, I think it is the lowest seat that was picked up with the smallest number of primary votes in Australian election history. If your viewers would like to correct the record, I'm more than happy to be corrected on that point. Very dubious title. So I won the seat with using group voting tickets, which are GVTs, and it's basically a way to shortcut the system and allow for somebody to vote for a party or a group of candidates without numbering sort of 1 to X on the ballot paper, and sort of allows for the political party to then sort of dictate terms around where those preferences are going to flow. And so we made a lot of agreements with minor parties, with major parties, to pick up basically the preference flow. And so when the parties are being excluded in those counting rounds, we're essentially picking up those votes and sort of amalgamating them and becoming this going from 98 to picking up a quota and then winning a seat. So we use that with the help of Glenn Drury. So he's known as the preference whisperer. He's been around for a little while and dabbled in a number of Australian political elections at the state and the federal level. Essentially relying on group voting tickets, I think, as a way to position sort of ordinary people into winning seats. Recently, the GVTs have been scrapped in Western Australia. We can certainly get into that. So it's going to make it harder, I think, for folks like Glenn to sort of put candidates like myself into seats in Parliament. But the door is still there.
So is it fair to say that you did not really go in expecting that you would win, and how did it feel to win?
As a sort of leader of a minor party, I think if you expect to win, then you're in for a world of hurt. It is the odds are certainly stacked against you. The system is such that the major parties have are pulling a lot of those strings. So it is challenging. If your viewers are familiar with the ABC prediction calculator after election night, it sort of gives you those 6 candidates that are being elected on the votes that have been counted so far. And I think it took about a week before the calculator actually put Wilson Tucker as one of those candidates. And after that fact, and my phone sort of blew up as a result. I was actually in Mexico at the time, and I had to make a pretty big life decision from living in Seattle and being in the software development field to throwing that all sort of onto the side and then coming back to Australia and taking the seat. And so after that fact, it was, became a lot more sort of crystallized, and then, I found myself being sort of sworn in and having to sort of make that decision and get back before the swearing in ceremony.
So, as you said, you weren't actually living in Western Australia at the time. You were in Seattle. So, you definitely have these political aspirations. It would be nice to get elected, but, you weren't necessarily, banking on that. People, before they get into Parliament, do have other lives and careers that they don't just put on hold until they get elected. So how did you feel making that decision and weighing it up between carrying on doing what you were familiar with, what you're good at, versus entering this entirely new career of Parliament?
Yeah, so I think it's when you least expect it is when when you get that serendipitous sort of lightning strike moment, and that was certainly the case for myself. In 2017, I ran in the election then, and we followed the more sort of traditional route of waving call flutes around and clipboards and trying to sort of get votes and sort of show your face and garner some level of support versus and then not actually winning the seat and really wanting the seat, versus then moving to Seattle and following my background in software development, software engineering. I found out in 2021 that I was actually still eligible to run. I had resided in Western Australia. Even though I wasn't living in the country at the time, I could still run. The party was still registered, fulfilled all the requirements with the WA Electoral Commission. And so it was more of a sort of a roll of the dice, you could say. Give it a shot. Let's why not? Without really expecting an outcome or a result. And I was actually in Mexico at the time. I was sort of working remotely, sitting on my laptop and drinking a few mojitos and watching the results come in. And because of the time delay, it was actually a case of waking up in the morning, pressing the refresh button on the ABC prediction calculator, and then one day it went from 6 random candidates to 5 random candidates and Wilson Tucker, and then I had to really make a pretty very quick and quite drastic sort of decision to come home. And as you said, David, sort of throw everything to the side. I was actually happy living in Seattle. I was in a career that I sort of definitely knew and loved, versus coming back to Western Australia and moving into an area that I wasn't familiar with at all. I didn't really have any sort of noble political aspirations other than I cared about daylight saving, and I felt like the government wasn't representing myself on the issue, and I thought it was a good lifestyle issue. It could benefit Western Australia, and the government is very conservative and just moves very slowly. So I felt a bit sort of disenfranchised or sort of disgruntled on this one issue, and that was my main catalyst for running. It wasn't born out of a very refined sort of political ideological base or anything, but it was one thing that I had a bit of an axe to grind, and it sort of snowballed and sort of catapulted me to this position.
Like you said, you are very passionate about daylight savings. However, that is a very sort of specific topic that doesn't necessarily have the same broad policy platform as other political parties. So what really was the value that you saw? What was the motivation of creating a political party around an issue instead of a petition or some other kind of campaign? Single issue parties do actually exist quite a lot. So why create a single issue political party instead of other means of political pressure?
Yeah, so look, there are certainly other avenues to get your voice heard and try and advance your issue, petitions and rallies and demonstrations and, varying forms of lobbying in all their different aspects. For myself, the issue of daylight saving is quite cyclical. It's, seasonal. Whenever the East Coast sort of comes in and out of daylight saving, the media will sort of jump on the issue for, a brief moment and ask a question about why doesn't WA have daylight saving. And I looked at the requirements to start a political party in WA through the WAEC, and it wasn't that difficult. It turns out you need 500 registrations, and so I gathered a few friends, and waved clipboards around after footy games, and did some social media blasts. We found the number. Relatively quickly with a fair bit of effort, but we got registered. And starting a political party is a good way of I felt sort of positioning yourself as a bit of a sort of a thought leader on that topic. The issue had been sort of largely left alone to its own devices after some sort of rather infamous comments by Colin Barnett saying after the referendum to don't touch the issue for a generation, it's dead and buried. And I felt like I wasn't being represented on the issue of daylight saving. I felt like it had credit, had credence. I've always viewed it as a bit of a lifestyle issue. We have a younger generation coming through. The millennials now sort of equal the boomers in terms of the largest, age cohort in Australia. And so I felt like it had weight, it had legs. It was about time that we sort of repositioned this issue and had another look at it. So starting a political party, I thought was a good way of sort of positioning myself and sort of capture, rather than going to the media will then naturally or organically sort of come to you. I certainly wouldn't discount other forms of of participating in our democratic institutions, e-petitions, petitions, writing letters, harassing local representatives, whatever it may be. They're all fantastic, but for myself, it just seemed like a relatively good way of positioning yourself and trying to beat that war drum in the media and trying to gather some support on a what's been described as a big little issue in Western Australia. It's big because it affects everyone. It's little because we're only talking about 1 hour difference.
Members of Parliament, they represent a community, and it is a balancing act really between their personal views and the views of the people they represent, and the conflicting views within the community of what they want achieved. You are no stranger to this. You're a big champion for daylight savings, but the community is has a lot of other key issues that they bring to you, and there's lots of conflict between what people in the community want. So how do you go about balancing that? How do you sort of deal with the responsibilities of being an elected member of Parliament now that you're here?
It's more of a listening exercise at that stage. You're right in saying daylight saving is an issue. It's very if you weight it against the entire society that WA represents, it is a small issue. It's a very narrow sort of purview. So as a leader of a micro party or an independent, you're really forced to represent people on a whole range of issues that affect their daily lives. So you can't just sort of flog the proverbial horse for 4 years and just focus on the one issue. You are forced, in a sense, to really look more broadly and form opinions or solicit feedback on a wide range of issues. When there's an issue that comes up for debate, I try and sort of view it from the regional sort of mining and pastoral lens and sort of think about what people in the regions want. And there's a few different ways of sort of gauging, community feedback and support for an issue. There are various sort of lobby groups or interest groups that you can speak to, or experts that can help you form an opinion. If it doesn't affect the regions and it's sort of more sort of city or metro focused, I think that's where I get a bit more sort of social license to just put the sort of the Wilson Tucker hat on and form sort of an opinion. Something like trading hours, for example, where it's not such a burning issue in regional Western Australia, but there is, I believe, an issue of restrictive trading hours affecting the metro areas and the city of Perth. So it is a balancing act. I don't have the magic formula for it, but really, my role as an independent, as a member of Mining and Pastoral, is to really listen to constituents and try and echo what they're telling me and what I view as which will produce the best outcome for them.
Let's really hone in on what it's like being a member of Parliament. So you're an independent. You don't have the support of a party room to help you come up with decisions or the resources to examine what an issue is. How does that, affect your job? How do you go about coming to a perspective or idea in the chamber? You
really have to form an opinion on a wide range of issues, and not necessarily be a subject matter expert on everything, but be enough to be sort of dangerous and understand the main points in the debate and have enough sort of ammunition or expertise to defend your position. I think there is a prevailing myth that if you're a member of Parliament, you have the endless amount of resources, and that is definitely not true. As I think if you're on the government side of the equation, you have more access to agencies, to departments. Certainly in a larger party, you have more of a sounding board to, I think, gauge your ideas and sort of refine them a little bit. As someone on the crossbench on sort of the non-government side, you have access to a research officer, an electorate officer, but your resources are quite limited, and a lot of bills can come at you in fairly rapid fire succession. So you have to really choose your battles and learn when to put blinkers on and let some things pass through, and also when to reach out, when to sort of dig deep and try and understand an issue and engage, determine community sentiment on something, and when you should be really sort of engaging and going at it sort of 100 miles an hour versus something that is maybe a sort of a bureaucratic change. It isn't going to affect the people you represent, so sort of letting it slide. I think one of the biggest challenges is sort of untangling the web of bureaucracy that is our government, and learning, and also finding subject matter experts, you know, in the private sector or in academic circles who to talk to when a bit of legislation is coming through, and who can give you, you know, the non-political statement, or, you know, sound out what an issue, you know, where it is, what are the gaps, and help you form an opinion. So there's lots to take in. You really, I think, choosing your battles and choosing them wisely is something I've learned over the last couple of years.
It sounds like a challenging job, but is there scope for, you know, for ordinary people and people of all sort of different walks of life who don't want to be career politicians to enter this space and contribute?
Yeah, look, absolutely. And I think people with ordinary backgrounds are well positioned, well suited for Parliament. I think you certainly have a lot of lawyers, a lot of sort of union officials, ex-union guys and girls that have come through in Parliament in this term at least. I have a background in software engineering. It doesn't give me any sort of special, you know, abilities or any sort of background in debating or, you know, political ideology or anything. But I think if you have we're talking about a contest of ideas in the chamber, and I think you have more diversity, people from different backgrounds, from different ethnicities, coming through and being and participating as part of that debate. I think it produces better outcomes. So absolutely, I don't think it should be confined to the career politicians. I think the more ordinary people, and I use the quotes ordinary, that we have as part of that debate in Parliament, I think the better outcomes and the better representation that we have in this country and in this state. And I would encourage minor parties and micro parties to run and still try and have a seat at the table, because there is still space, and it is good, certainly in the House of Review and the upper house, when you have, you know, diverse opinions at the table and debating and scrutinising legislation.
Thank you very much for your time.
David, thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed this. Comment down below what you would like to learn about next, or, you know, give me suggestions for who to interview next. Share, subscribe, all those sorts of things. And thank you to those who support me on Patreon, and I will see you next time.